It's illustrated. I appreciate you all having me here tonight. I've actually been on tour around the state all this week doing the show from different cities around North Carolina. And I just came today. I passed up the opportunity to have dinner with Elizabeth Dole. Darn. I could probably script what she would have said, and it would have been through this. And the whole time I would have been like this. Because I don't know, I may be out on a limb here, but I'm thinking you, like me, don't trust Republicans anymore than you trust Democrats when it comes to budget. That's right, because they smile and tell you they'll cut while they increase. At least Democrats say they'll increase. But I want to thank Barbara for for putting the organizational side of things together today, and for Sean and Lee for always being there whenever I call, whether as a guest or guests or even filling in for me, which that got me some interesting emails. I take some time off and have these guys take over the show and hand over my airwaves, the 3 hours I'm on a day, to these guys, and they do a fabulous job. And I think what they're able to do, and what many libertarians are able to do, is let people know that, oh my goodness, there's people that think like me, and they're not under a D or an R. What a concept! But as I was in Raleigh the last 2 days, I was doing my show live from the Civitas Conservative Leadership Conference, a national conference. It's a state level type thing, but I had the unfortunate fortune of speaking after Rudy Giuliani the day before this, which basically I was the pee break. I understood my role in that lineup, but what I saw from people at that conference, and I'm not talking about the politicians, and there were many of them, but what I saw from people at this conservative leadership conference was a hunger and a frustration in their eyes. I saw it was like the people lost in the desert. Everyone's walking around. We have to figure out who we are again. Oh, we lost so bad. And I heard one speaker up on the podium in front of 500 people say, do you realize we got our clocks clean? We had 2,000 Republicans lose in November of last year. Everybody, oh, I had no idea. And I'm thinking to myself, sitting at my table going, and how many libertarians were wiped out with a swipe of a pen in North Carolina? You hear me? Were we connected a little bit here? I mean, there's a group of people that are hungry for liberty. And that group of people find themselves under a lot of different labels. And when they asked me for a title for what I want to speak about tonight, I said, well, I don't know. I don't usually know what I'm going to say until I stand up at a podium. I said, but how about the Liberty Coalition? What does that mean? I don't know. I'll figure it out. But you know, it came to me as I've been traveling around the state this week. Chris Fitzsimmons, who is with NC Policy Watch, which bills itself as a liberal think tank, he was pointing out in frustration in his Friday Follies mailer that he sends out online that the General Assembly in their budget talks, that the Council of Seven, or whatever the title might be, of the power brokers and the leadership of North Carolina House of Representatives decided to pull themselves off into a corner office somewhere and talk about what the budget is going to be. These 7 people, these Democratic leaders, put a big sign on the door and said, keep this door locked. There's a liberal that's pretty upset with the Democrats, too, is hungry for liberty. It may have differing views on the role of government, but the frustration of an unopened government, a dishonest government, and centralization of power and decision-making is prevalent within people that call themselves conservatives, people that call themselves liberals. And I think where they go astray is that they're trusting those frustrations to people that are at the top of political parties. I think that's where their misguided trust is. And so, as I talk about a liberty coalition, I think there's great opportunity for people to step across different labels and really take our state back, take our local governments back, take our country back. It is possible. We've shown throughout history that a few committed, passionate people can change the course of events, can change history. You know, when I first found out about the Libertarian Party, I was in the Air Force at the time. I was a medic in the Air Force for 8 years. And I didn't follow politics or anything like that. But the first time, I got a promotion. I was a non-commissioned officer for the first time, E4. I'll get a pay raise. Oh, great, I can't wait. Oh, all of a sudden, I was in a tax bracket. First time ever. I got my first paycheck as an E4, and I looked at it and said, wait a minute, it's no bigger than when I was an E3 at the same time. I thought I had a raise coming. I just went and bought my nice little Toyota Tercel. I got excited. I had car payments now. No extra money to pay the payment. No extra money for the full insurance coverage that was mandated on me. And so I looked around, and I'm like, oh, goodness, what am I going to do? I already bought this thing. I thought they told me I had a raise coming and everything. A colonel that I worked with, Colonel Billingsley, walked over, great guy. But he always had this kind of thing about him. You know, he was always frustrated, always just, you thought maybe the guy was going to implode or explode one day at work. But he would stop, he'd look at you, and he'd deliver a line where you go, wow. Well, I had immeasurable respect for Colonel Billingsley. And when I was scared to death. What am I going to do? What do I have a car payment? I don't have any extra money, and because I'm in the military, I can't go get a second job off base. They don't let me do that. So what am I going to do? He handed me a Harry Brown pamphlet. That was my first introduction to the Libertarian Party. What timing! And I was telling Sean and Lee before dinner that actually when I look at that situation and that awakening, that click that all of a sudden happened in that moment. There were some earlier incidents, even when I was 15 years old, where I had inclinations, I had that trigger of libertarian, constitutional kind of frustrations. My first real job other than a paper route was to work in a lumber yard. My best friend and I figured, well, we have 2 weeks, our parents are going to let us work, to make some real money. And we knew that there was a lumber yard that we could get paid $4 an hour and earn a couple $100 in just a couple of weeks. We were excited. We already had money spent in our heads. We're going to get a canoe. That's what we were going to do with the money. So we worked our tails off. I've never worked so hard in my life before, during, or since that time. It was the hardest work I ever did. Coming into the 2 weeks when we went to collect our money, the owner all of a sudden decided, now I'm going to give you $50 each. Wait a minute. We agreed on $200 for $200 apiece for the 2 weeks. It was $100 a week. We worked full time, and his response basically was, "Well, what are you going to do about it? You guys are 15 years old. Who are you going to call? What are you going to?" And look back, that was my first experience with a tax man. My money was taken from me without me having any say or recourse in it. But back to the political parties, and I have to warn you, some of what I want to share with you today. Tonight might be a little bit edgy, but I figure if anyone can handle it, it's libertarians. Political parties, to me, and I mean all parties, I think are counterproductive to self-government. I'm not the only one to feel that way. I wanted to read for you a quote from George Washington. It said, "The disorders and miseries which result with political parties gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual." One person leads the party. You see it all the time on the national level with the Democrats and Republicans. "And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns his disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty." George Washington in his farewell address. Now, we don't have to look very far in North Carolina to find a perfect example of what he's talking about right there. Jim Black, perfect example. He went on to say, "The common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and the duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it." Political parties are the death knell to self-government. And I mentioned Jim Black. Michael Decker just got 4 years. All right. When prosecutors tried to soften the blow, well, he talked to us. Shouldn't send him to jail. The judge said, "I'm going to double it." There's a lot of crimes out there. For me, abusing the trust of the people when you're in office is one of the worst. The damage that you do affects thousands. The apathy, the disdain, the discouragement that it gives people, and they're less likely to be empowered to get involved. Well, what does it matter? It's all the same. They're all corrupt. I want to tell you also that in the General Assembly, a high-up leader of the Republican Party stopped by his office and had a conversation with him mentioned something about the Libertarian Party and ballot access, took the opportunity to argue for ballot access. And his response to me was, and you'll love this, I know these guys have already heard this story,